Hey everybody, welcome to our first podcast episode. We're actually out here in the Land Lab today, and we'll be going over a little bit about who we are, what we do, and how we got interested in all of this. And we'll also be talking to you all about our new Land Lab simulator. We're really excited to be launching that next week, and I'll let Kimball start off with who he is and his role at Live Oak.
Thanks, Joe. I'm Kimball Hildreth. Joe and I are actually brothers. We've got a team of about 8 that all of us pitch in building software, garden systems, graphics, video. We've got Ben behind the camera. So all of us come together to make the Live Oak project and the Land Lab project a reality. So Live Oak is the name of our education efforts, and the Acorn Land Lab is where we are right now. It's one of 3 land labs that we've been running to test all these circular off-grid systems. My role is just kind of being the glue to pull all these efforts together for what we're working on, whether it's content, testing systems, building software like the Land Lab simulator. Does that about do it, Joe?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we've got our little handy-dandy agenda here for podcast number 1, why we're building the Land Lab. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Joe. Why do you think we're building all this? Why are we building it? What's the purpose?
Well, for me, I got married 2 years ago, and I now have a little 1-year-old daughter, and it's the best thing ever. But with that transition of change also came the change in moving from an apartment to a house. And, rent looked good. Yeah, we were excited to get in. And about 2 months into living in this new house, utility bills started coming. And I was shocked. I was like, oh my gosh. Like, it's almost as much as our rent all combined. And I remember growing up, my dad was always like, turn the light off every time I'd leave a room, and I was like, whatever. But now that I'm in that role, oh my gosh. So utilities, that was the first thing that kind of hit me. And I was like, there has to be something else besides this. Then also food prices. Also when COVID hit, it was a little frightening going to the grocery store and seeing all these empty aisles. And I realized how fragile that system is. It's not a theory of how fragile it is. COVID actually showed us how fragile it is. Like globalization is not the way to go about things. So anyway, those are the first few little things that hit me. But by having this land lab, it demonstrates that we can meet our 5 basic needs: water, food, sanitation, energy, and shelter, a lot more efficiently, sustainably, and also more affordably than what the modern takes on all of that are. So, we don't need a suburb home. We don't need those crazy high utility costs, because when you actually use these systems, all those prices come down. I know a lot of people are interested in these things because it's sustainable, and we are too. That's a great factor. But what got me into this is the finance part of it. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people overlook that.
Right.
I think it's easy to look at this and be like, oh, those are those off-grid, hippies. But actually, I'm part of Gen Z. I like going out to eat. I like, taking part in not just off-grid stuff. Even though I love a lot of this, there are other things I like doing. But for me, it was enticing because of the financial side. That's how I got into all of this. That's why I believe in the land labs and what goes into them. So I know that was a long spiel, but yeah.
No, that's perfect. I think folks want to hear that. Like, why are we doing it? Why are we into it? What's the point? What are the benefits? And as we've been discovering more and more, I think more people want to hear about the off-grid economics.
Yeah.
What do these things cost? Are they viable alternatives to the way we're living now, whether it's in an apartment in the city, in the suburbs, more rurally? Because with the way that inflation, supply chain fragility, all these centralized systems are looking more and more brittle. It doesn't mean they're all going to fail immediately. They're not, but they're being stressed. So we need alternatives. We need resilient, distributed alternatives.
Yeah. So why did you get into all of this?
Well, it all started with food. Learning about how a carrot today has a fraction of the nutrients of a carrot from the 1940s or before.
Yeah, it's a third, right?
I think that's about it.
3 carrots to equal 1 carrot?
Yeah, I'd have to look it up.
100 years ago.
You were looking at those numbers recently.
Yeah, that's what the study said.
Learning about how food has lost so much of its nutrition, that was a shocker for me. Growing up in the suburbs, there really aren't a lot of farms around here. Food just magically shows up in the grocery store. After that trip down to Nicaragua to see how people in more of a kind of subsistence living environment in his fishing village lived, it showed me just how wildly wealthy a grocery store is here in the States or in another Western country. There weren't grocery stores down there in Padre Ramos that looked anything like the Publix or Walmart or Target or Whole Foods.
Right.
So after that trip coming back here, it gave me a whole new perspective on just the sheer abundance of food we have to pick from. And that got me interested in, well, how do we even go about growing this? I was just curious. So I started researching how our food system works, quickly found out that we rely on big ag. We rely on massive companies. We rely on fossil fuels from overseas, fertilizers from overseas. And the miracle of the system is that today it works. It really does. But there's no guarantee it's going to work forever. From what I continue to read and see from authors, whether it's Joel Salatin or David Holmgren, Kate Rayworth, Catherine Hayhoe, these are thinkers that have written books and published material showing that we're losing topsoil. Farmers are getting older and older. There's not enough young farmers coming to the system. We're highly dependent on fossil fuels. We are burning out the soil with synthetic fertilizer. Our current system for food, which is a miracle today, it isn't sustainable. So that's what got me into all this.
Yeah.
And then I discovered that author and farmer Joel Salatin. He's written so many good books, but the first book I read was called Folks, This Ain't Normal. I think he wrote that book in 2016.
Yeah.
But he was talking about just how ludicrous so many of our norms in suburban life are, from the way that, we get salad greens any time of year that are shipped thousands of miles from California here to Georgia. We're burning way more calories of energy using fuel than the calories we receive from that lettuce. It's a net energy loss across the board. But Joel Salatin just talked about practical things like, why don't we eat seasonally anymore? Why don't we rely on more local food? I mean, Georgia, we can grow so much food here. And down in South Georgia, there's way more ag. But up here in the Piedmont, ag has been pushed out as the suburbs have expanded. I just started, really digging into his work. And then he talked about other authors, that led to other authors. So learning about David Holmgren, talking about how he is predicting an energy crisis in the 2020s. Now, granted, this all happened to some extent back in the 70s. People thought there was going to be an energy crisis, and there were bumps. But we continue to have all these unstable, centralized, brittle systems, whether it's central water, central power, from the coal plants. That's a whole other issue.
Right.
Basically, we're just economically, ecologically, we're living so far beyond our means. And eventually the bill's going to come due. So I like all this because I don't want to live in debt my whole life, having to go commute to Atlanta to work in a cubicle. So I don't want to live in debt. I want to eat healthy food. I love my computer work. It's engaging, but I like to balance it out with working outdoors. So if I had to sum up why I'm interested in all this, Joe, I don't want to ramble. I want to eat healthy food that's grown locally, that doesn't have a massive pollution footprint. I want to live more affordably. I want to be able to teach my 2 boys and any other future children how to do this too. I love getting to work with the backyard chickens, and we just got our first little cooney pig that you saw earlier today.
Yeah.
Those animals are meant to be integrated into the landscape. Their manure builds up the soil grows better grass, the animals eat that grass, omnivores like chickens and pigs, and then we've got better soil to grow vegetables in. If you think you can just take a few seeds and go grow food if there's a crisis, you've got another thing coming. If you live in a suburban house where they scraped all the topsoil off. So just waking up to the fact that we're so far removed from our food, our energy, our sanitation, our water, our shelter systems. I want to be more connected to all this because I think it's a really fun, challenging problem to solve. But I also believe that with the looming financial crisis, a potential energy crisis, the geopolitical issues that we're seeing now, we had decades and decades of relative peace after World War II, but over in Russia and Ukraine, that's a domino, and other dominoes are going to fall.
Right.
People need resilient systems like these off-grid systems globally. And my dream is that our team with Acorn Land Labs can show people how to start moving in that direction so that they're not so dependent on big corporations, big government programs, and we're living more affordably and sustainably. So I'm going to put a pin in it there just so I don't ramble on. You talked about the simulator we're building, and I'll touch on that too before we go into more details. All of this has complexity to it. A tiny house, building that, methane digester, permaculture garden, raising mushrooms, raising worms, vermicomposting to build nutrients, raising black soldier flies, rainwater collection, solar. There's a lot going on, and it takes time to learn. We're building the simulator to show anyone they can drag and drop these systems to see what inputs are needed, what systems cost, what outputs are produced, to see what percentage of my food, water, shelter, food, and energy can these systems produce. What's the budget? How can I pay for this? And where can I find a legal place to build these systems?
Yeah.
So that's just the nutshell. That's why we're building the digital simulator.
Talking about a legal place to build these systems, do you want to talk about your little Airbnb experience and just kind of the frustrations with zoning? Local governments, federal governments, they don't make it too easy for some of this, but that's why it's important to get this message out there so we can make those changes.
Yeah, absolutely. As our team has experimented more with all this off-grid technology, we've realized this goes hand in hand with glamping. You might have heard of glamping. It's a portmanteau. Is that how you pronounce that word? It's two words combined together, portmanteau. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation. I'm gonna look that up later. Glamping is glamorous camping. So instead of like a rinky-dinky Coleman tent and a gas stove, we decided, let's put together a high-end campsite on our 2 acres in the suburbs as an affordable place for out-of-towners to come stay on Airbnb. We've seen other people that have done it, and it's really popular because it's affordable to set it up and it provides an affordable place for people to stay, because Airbnbs can be so expensive.
Yeah.
And hotels are expensive, but this was a little bit more, off-grid. So we got a canvas tent, a canvas bell tent, and then a few solar panels to charge a solar generator. Then we've got a canvas outhouse with a composting toilet, and then it's got a pump sink. And if you look back in our shorts, you can see some of this stuff. Ben actually did the demo on the campsite. But all in, that whole campsite, I think it cost somewhere between $4,000 or $5,000. It's in the video. We put some of that in like a no interest credit card, and then the plan was just to pay it off as guests came, which we did for a while. We got the glamping site set up. It's got the fire pit. It's got the outhouse with the toilet and the sink. You've got a fan and then like a heated blanket in the main tent, board games and all that, coffee maker. And we charged people $90 a night to stay there. And people were coming. We were booking out weekends. Well, we discovered our county just passed an ordinance a few months ago requiring a business license for an Airbnb. But not only that, it prevented you from making an Airbnb with a ADU, auxiliary dwelling unit. It prevents you from using an RV or tents. So the county literally just put the kibosh on creative Airbnbs like that, which they copy and pasted ordinances from other counties.
Yeah.
I don't think our county leadership has the vision to see how cool this can be. So we're going to try to go through the channels to change the laws. That takes time, it takes money, and it really is slow and frustrating. That's one of the biggest challenges to off-grid living. It's zoning laws. Banks and the government, Fannie Mae with home financing, they're not readily giving out home loans to build off-grid homes. It might be possible, but I don't think it's super easy. So banks and government aren't helping you finance systems like this. People that do it typically pay for it as they go. And local counties and cities make a lot of these systems illegal. The tiny house, those are catching on, thankfully. They've been around long enough. More and more towns like Atlanta, Savannah are legalizing tiny houses. So there's progress. It's just not happening fast enough for people that want to do this today.
Yeah, because the biggest issue is the upfront cost. I know so many of our commenters in our community that comment on our shorts, they're like, this looks awesome, but they're like, they'll joke around like, the first thing you need is money.
Right.
And then you need land, which is true. And I think, we'll never get to a position where it'll be easy to finance these things and whatnot unless we save up, get the upfront costs going, and then through that, over time, maybe those laws can start changing. So even though we're trying to brute force our way into getting all these systems up and running in a more difficult way, it might make the path easier for the next generation, because zoning laws will have changed, hopefully, by spreading this message.
We'll have changed them.
Yeah, we'll have changed them. And that way, you only need 3 to 5% down on, some of these systems, and then you can finance it out. And, that's going to, over time, you can pay that off, and this will be just set up legally the same way you would with, buying a suburb home today or, a car.
Exactly. Because from my wife and I, our very first home up in the North Atlanta area, we bought it and it was $160,000. It was a brick ranch home in the suburbs, and we used a new home buyer program, so we put 3% down. I forget exactly how much we paid with closing costs and all that, $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 or so. It was actually closer to $6,000 or $8,000, I believe. But at any rate, that 3% down program was a godsend for us because it allowed us to get into the housing ladder. We had a few $1,000s. We bought our first home with that small down payment, 3% down. And the government effectively helped us to get into a home.
Yeah.
Because the government buys the mortgages from the banks. So it's the United States government that enables our mortgage programs. And that's good. It's good for people to own a piece of the American pie. It helps give you an incentive to work on your home, keep it up, keep it nice. And we've rented before. Like, it's good to have a balance based on the season you need to be in. So I'm not trying to say there's one route that's better than the other. There's articles that I've seen from like the World Economic Forum that say that Gen Z and millennials don't want to own, they just want to rent. I don't agree with that at all. Most people I know that are millennials want to own their own home.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. When I see articles that are written by other people and other generations saying that our generations don't want to own homes, I think they're doing us a disservice.
Yeah.
But the example I'm painting there with the $160,000 house, so we paid 3% down for the $160,000 house. This whole land lab here, our rough estimate for how much all these systems cost was roughly $90,000.
Yeah.
$90,000 is, well, we're looking at $70,000 less than our first suburban home. If you actually could put 3% down on all these systems, you're not paying utilities. You're capturing rainwater, you're collecting solar power, you've got methane gas for cooking fuel. Granted, our first home up there, I think our first home was around 1,500 square feet. This tiny house is 178 square feet.
Yeah.
So it's a lot smaller. But for a newly married couple, this could absolutely work. And you're even growing 25% or more of your food on site. So it's a much smaller home, but it provides its utilities. The taxes would be way less. The insurance is way less. Obviously, tiny homes are popular because people realize this provides what we need. No, it's not a 2,000 square foot home, but it's enough.
Right.
I think enough is an important word with what we're doing.
Yeah. I think there's also a misconception where a lot of people think that we're trying to replicate the modern lifestyle with these systems. That's not what we're trying to do. There's such an abundance with today's modern living practices. It's too much, and that's also the same sort of argument with green energy. There's no way that green energy can replicate what fossil fuels are doing today, but it's because we're just using far too much. We really just need to bring it back down to a more simpler life. And it turns out that a more simple lifestyle, it's actually more healthy. And for me, it gives me more freedom. And because of that, I actually enjoy my day-to-day life more so than before. So it's kind of interesting how that works.
Right. We've had some commenters, and I've seen people online that think ideas like the 15-minute city are big conspiracy theories.
Right.
They're not. It's good urban planning. I don't want to have to drive to the grocery store 10 minutes away and then drive to the post office. The suburban framework requires you to own one or more vehicles.
Yeah.
You're spending at least $10,000 a year on car insurance, maintenance costs. That's the average amount the average US citizen spends on car expenses per year, 10,000 plus. So you're forced into participating in car culture in the suburbs. Once again, zoning laws prohibit us from designing walkable, compact townships like we used to. Mm-hmm. I find this is really interesting. You know, areas like Seaside, Florida, that are like new urbanism planning zones, or even downtown McDonough, how home prices have gone up in these walkable zones. People want to live in walkable areas. But the irony is often it's more so the wealthy now that are living in the walkable zones because the prices have been driven up because there's so few walkable communities in America when most people want a walkable community.
Yeah.
If you could walk to the store, the post office, if we could walk to work or bike, e-bike, scooter, ride like a little enclosed golf cart like the Squad solar car.
Yeah.
A Squad solar car is $6,000 roughly. They should release them next year in the US. That is less than a quarter the cost of the average new car.
Yeah. And something kind of in between, going from the Squad car to today's vehicle is a bit of a leap, but a good in between is like Aptera.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Priced at $25,000 for their basic model.
Right.
But what they're saying is 1,000 miles of range, solar powered, it's an EV. Like, I like seeing, progress. I think one thing our commenters talk about a lot is, we'll present a neat new solution. And to be frank, they'll kind of crap on it. They'll be like, oh my gosh, well, like how these batteries are made and all this. It's not perfect. It's not. But you cannot get to a perfect system without going through, trial and error. And, we have to start somewhere. Like,
right.
A great example of that, it was the hydro panels.
Yeah.
These are solar panels that are able to suck water, moisture.
Pulls out of the humidity.
Yeah, pulls out of the humidity. Basically, you get drinking water. When they first came out, which was just a couple years ago, very expensive because it's new tech. And we made a video on it, and there was a lot of commenters talking about the outrageous price of it. But that's because it's new tech. It needs to start somewhere. But already they've come down significantly in price. And that already shows, like, it has to start somewhere, but that's progress.
Right.
And I think a lot of people need to, recognize that.
Right. Those hydro panels that pull water from the air, I have to go back and look at the numbers, but when I got a quote for 2 of them, I believe it was somewhere in the range of $18,000.
No one's going to buy that.
No. It's an experimental technology. But the new panels are like $3,000 a piece. So that's a third the price.
Right.
And as more people see that the tech works, the price can continue to drop as mass production kicks in. So all these systems we share, especially if they're new ones that are being developed, need to be taken with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Do you want to move out of the sun? It's getting a little toasty over here.
Yeah, it is.
We just kind of wrapped up talking about just how, we're trying to show what's possible, even with some technology that's experimental.
Yeah.
But by and large, I'd say 95% of everything we're showing off or talking about is either old methods like permaculture, tried and true concepts like composting, even the methane digester. That technology was developed first in 1859. There's nothing new about that.
Yeah.
So with all these systems that you've been showcasing to people through shorts and long format video, what would be your dream setup with your family?
Yeah.
Wife, kids, like what does that off-grid system look like for you?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I'm the one that posts our shorts and a part of that team, Ben and I, everyone thinks that I am like the ultimate off-grid dude, like ever. But I'm just the one that's kind of the face of our operations here and presenting these systems. In reality, I'm not on either side really of, super modern living or super off-grid living. I'm like in a healthy-ish middle. For me and my family, I'll be honest, I don't want to live in a tiny house. Like it's very compact.
And that's fair.
And that's just me though. I know a family of 6 that live in a tiny house and love it. Like, I'm not saying that tiny house won't work for a family. It can, it does, just not my family.
You bring up a great point. What we're trying to do is not force everyone in the world into this blueprint.
No.
We want to have so many options available to all of us.
Right.
The point is allowing options and diversity of solutions.
Right.
That's the point. Like, if you don't like tiny houses, maybe a big yurt is your thing, or just a big cabin.
Yeah, and I mean, even as extreme as we go, it's still not super extreme because we would never recommend that you try to provide 100% of your food. That's gonna be very difficult. But in a healthy, thriving local economy, 25 to 30% is doable. And the rest, trading, farmer markets, like that's a healthy environment.
Right, bartering, like if you're growing beef cattle and I'm growing pigs, or if, someone's growing tomatoes, when you have a network of people that are doing what you're doing, you can make your local food percentage hit 95%.
Yeah.
Even if you're only growing 20% or 30%.
My personal setup is it's a mixture of modern living and these off-grid, systems. So it would look like basically your normal house.
Right.
Not like your bloated McMansion though.
Right.
Like,
so we're talking like a house that might be more typical for like a 1920s, 30s America.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But then I would want solar panels, which I think that's the first normal step people think of when you go off grid.
Sure.
It's solar panels, that's what you see. But solar panels, they aren't a silver bullet, but it's a great step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
I think the next step would definitely be a rainwater collection system, especially living here in Georgia.
Yeah. We get around 60 inches of rain per year.
Yeah, okay.
Average.
So for me, it'd be solar panels first, and then it would be the rainwater collection system. And then I think definitely compost and the methane digester. I'd be able to cook a lot outside, and that would, cut out the need for as much gas inside. And then also having the water set up, even if you're not looking to drink it, because you'd need a filtration system for that. All of a sudden, all your water for your gardening is taken care of. If you do want to shower.
Right. That's expensive. Using county water last year for us.
Yeah.
We're going to save a ton this year with our rainwater collection system for the garden.
Yeah. So for me, that's what I would want. A normal house, probably from, no McMansion, just a normal house.
Right.
And then solar panels, methane digester, compost. And just to be clear with you all, our community, this land lab that you all see in our videos, this isn't our personal land lab. It's not, these aren't systems that we use daily. This is our work site. This is where we get to share about these different systems. We work as a team to keep them up and running, to promote them, to talk about them. But they're heavily tested. Like our gardener, he works out here. He ate all of his meals off of the methane digester. He cooked all of them for like a month or two.
Right.
So we do test them heavily enough where we can confidently say you can live off of these just about, we're in the process of proving that, and we're going to continue to keep proving that as the year goes out.
If I weren't married with kids, I'd be living in there. I think you might be. So actually, eventually Ben might live out here.
Yeah, our camera guy. We're doing something called Off-Grid October, and I won't get into that, I don't want to give too much away, but it is going to involve seeing some of us, live out here for more than a week just off of systems and off of the practices that we promote and whatnot.
Right. Here in the Urban Land Lab, because this one's in a historic downtown area on a third of an acre lot. Then we've got a suburban land lab on 2 acres, and then a 7-acre land lab, which is more rural.
Yeah.
Right now there's Berkshire pigs out there, not a whole lot else going on, but off Good October we'll have tests going on all 3 sites.
Yeah, and I know I talked about the systems I would like in place. Those are just a fraction of the systems that we do have. I think it'd be really neat if we go walk around and show all the systems that you can incorporate.
Yeah.
And even here at this land lab, we don't even show all of them because we don't, have hydro panels, but we'd
Right.
like to. But at least your 5 basic needs are met with the systems we have here.
Yeah,
so I think
absolutely.
it might be good to walk around and show those real fast before we dive into our land lab designer.
Right, because we're going to go into more of the nitty gritty on the Land Lab simulator. That Kickstarter is starting next week, end of May 2023.
Yeah.
We're super excited about it because that's the tool that helps everyone design their version of all these systems to work wherever you are, because every location on Earth has different average temperatures, humidity levels, biomass availability. All these systems, because they're sustainable and circular in nature, they perform differently in different environments. All right, we'll save all those details for later.
Yeah.
But all right, so the tour of the systems here, just as kind of a refresher for folks, what are circular systems? What do they look like?
Yeah.
How do they function? All right, so we've got the raised beds. This is our market garden area. Raised beds with beets, mint, basil, more beets, onion and garlic, potatoes, thyme, peppers or eggplants, strawberries. This is the 400-watt solar panel that pulls the power for the tiny house battery generator. Got dill, the spring peas are just about done. So this is where all the produce is grown. We've got a pollinator garden in the front and then bird houses just to increase biodiversity here in the garden. This soil was hard pan clay, red clay 3 years ago. But as we've composted, brought in biochar, liquid fertilizer, worm castings, this soil is so rich now. Last year we grew just over 1,000 pounds of produce. This year it looks like we're on track to double it. We've got sensors and cameras throughout the garden, more so for the educational aspect of what we're doing. You don't practically need the sensors and the cameras to grow high quality produce. This is one of our camera Acorn sensors that's got temperature and soil moisture sensors in the ground there, and it sends information back to a relay. So with the raised beds, these log beds, which are more biodegradable, we had fun making those, and then the in-ground beds, you can grow a ridiculous amount of produce in a small space. Well, I mean, we're on a 1/3 of an acre lot here.
Yeah.
Am I missing anything from this system? Like, this is where all the magic happens for growing the produce.
Yeah, I think it's a good system to start on because this one is a garden. And I think a lot of people recognize what a garden is.
Right.
And then you recognize solar. Now there's a lot of systems on the other side of the fence that are ones that are far more unique, like a biopod, methane digester. So this is a more simpler system. And then we'll get into more of the intricate ones when we head over there.
That's a good distinction. People know what the garden is, but a lot of those systems, they help make the garden as successful as it is.
Yeah.
So the unsung hero systems are in the back.
Yeah.
Just like, I don't think we'll visit them right now, but the chickens in the chicken coop and the backyard across the street, those chickens are fed on veggie scraps from this garden. They're fed on black soldier flies from the back systems. People are familiar with chickens and gardens, but to raise these things locally, organically, and without spending money on inputs, these systems in the back are what help bring that magic. We love these grow bags because we can move plants when there's a snap frost or a surprise, chilly season. This is the tool shed here on the 3rd acre land lab. So we've got the tool shed for tools. We'll probably be putting a rainwater collection system on this eventually as well. It needs some repair work. You can see we've got morning glories that are gonna be growing on a green wall here just to provide more biomass for our liquid fertilizer when we pull them down. But in the meantime, they're also great for pollinators. So back here, in the shaded part of the Acorn Land Lab, we have auxiliary water tanks here. There's a rainwater collection system coming off the tiny house. So the tiny house exterior is pretty much completed, a few last pieces to assemble, and then we'll finish the interior build out.
Yeah. Also, if you're curious about how much water you can get, what you want to do is take the square footage of your house's roof, multiply that number by 0.623, and that will tell you how much water you'll get in gallons per 1 inch rainfall. Because doing the math, you might be shocked by how much water you could be getting in your facility.
And that's exactly why we're building the Land Lab simulator, to make it easy for people to drag and drop systems and see what could I produce in terms of water,
Yeah.
liquid fertilizer, compost, produce, chicken eggs.
Right.
Because we've been studying these things for over, for years now. We're trying to bake it all into a simulator to make this knowledge more common.
Right, because it's hard to have those numbers off the top of your head, but the Land Lab simulator, I'm so excited for it next week, because now anyone can be like, oh, well, I live, in the United States, I live in California, I live up here. We'll bring up all the average, weather temps, the humidity levels and whatnot, and it'll tell you what you can expect from each system and whatnot. So
right.
It's really going to open the door for all these people to understand how they could benefit from these systems, which is pretty great.
Absolutely. And eventually in future feature upgrades, we want to have like a alert based on your location to tell you your zoning laws permit all these off-grid systems. Or heads up, your local zoning might give you problems if you want to go in a tiny house or do rainwater collection.
Or it could tell you, put a tree wall here so they can't see anything. That's illegal. I'm kidding. We're not going to do that.
So for the sake of going over these systems and reminding people what they produce, the garden over there produced over 1,000 pounds of produce last summer. And we didn't even have a full growing season. The chickens, the little backyard flock, produced over 800 eggs last year. Should be lots more this year. We get thousands of gallons of rainwater from the rainwater collection systems. So these are the auxiliary tanks. This is the rainwater pump that we use to move water around the zone. Someone fired up a lawnmower, so you might hear a little background noise. These are the two tanks that are taking water off the rainwater system. This is the first flush diverter. The water then, when it fills up past the first flush, is going to siphon into these two IBC tanks. And then we've got the hose connections here. So we've got plenty of water on demand for the garden. We get food waste from local restaurants, coffee grounds. Food waste and coffee grounds go in our biopods where we raise the black soldier fly larvae. We won't go into detail because we've got shorts and we've got other videos talking about that. But the black soldier flies are a food source for the chickens. The black soldier flies are then harvested in these buckets. They self-harvest. That's one of the free feed inputs we're generating here for the chickens across the way. Let's go into the worm house here. We're growing mushrooms, and right now we're growing worms for the worm castings in these tubs here. And with our first podcast episode, we're gonna find our stride. Joe, I'm realizing we're doing something that's pretty visual here. I know we're gonna have people listening to the podcast audio only.
Yeah.
So let's bear that in mind just as we move forward.
That'll just be motivation for them to check out the video.
Yeah, check out the video. But for the time being, we're just kind of doing a visual walkthrough for all the systems at the Acorn Land Lab as a reminder. These are the composting bins here in the back. We take shredded cardboard, we take leaves, grass clippings, green biomass like kudzu. We chop these things up, mix it with water, local horse manure. All kinds of good stuff is decomposing, making this super rich black compost. This truly is the magic for building soil in a garden. When you start composting, we went from having red clay that was hard, and now we're gonna hear the train as well. We got all kinds of fun stuff in this podcast.
That's just part of the
experience.
Land Lab podcast experience.
So this rich soil, this compost is what we put on our garden to replenish all the nutrients that are leaving through the vegetables we harvest. Soil is such an incredibly beautiful and complex medium. People make the mistake all the time of thinking that soil is dirt. Dirt is dead soil.
Yeah.
Soil is living. If it weren't for soil, none of our civilizations would have ever existed.
Right, full of microorganisms.
Right, the soil is living. These are compost rollers. These are in the simulator. Everything you're seeing is in the simulator that we're going to be talking about later. Tiny houses, greenhouses, compost rollers, worm bins, black soldier fly bins, ground compost units. And we're using all the data we're collecting to power the formulas to show people how these systems perform. Because if you know that you can produce X amount of chicken eggs, X amount of produce, if you know you can produce so many cubic yards of compost for your garden, if you know you can produce X kilowatt hours of energy and have so many thousand gallons of rainwater, there is an equation for all that shows you have enough of all this to support one human being. So then you up how many humans you're trying to support with your off-grid systems. I'm trying to support 2 people. So then I build a system that looks like the Acorn Land Lab here, and that supports 2 people.
Yeah.
They can live in the tiny house, there's enough room. All these systems provide enough water, 25% of the food, sanitation's covered. Speaking of, how about let's go take a look at the methane digester if you want to cover that one.
Before we go, fun fact about the compost piles, they get up to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's not just from the sun. In fact, most of it comes from the microorganisms inside, all the activity from those. I know I've shared that fact a time or two on shorts, but I find it so interesting because you can stick your hand into one of these and you pull it out instantly because it's so hot. And I think it's so neat.
It's worth repeating, absolutely. I mean, composting, we absolutely have to take our agriculture back towards recycling nutrients through composting. So we've got the original greenhouse here. Here's the methane digester. So this is where food waste, meat scraps, spoiled milk, spoiled cheese, old leftovers, the produce or the food waste goes in here in the sink, and then there's water mixed with cow manure for the methanogens. The methanogens break down all the sugars, starches, and the food waste. And then methane gas comes up through a filter and is stored in this tank. And that's what gives us the 2 hours per day of cooking fuel. So this is one of the systems in the simulator to show you if you install one of these methane digesters, or you can DIY your own version. We've got plans we're linking to show you how to build your own methane digester with an IBC tank. So I think that's something that's important.
Yeah.
You can buy all these systems pre-made, but we know many people are trying to save as much money as they can, and we get that. We do the same thing when we can. So we're gonna link every system to a purchasable circular system or a DIY one that you can make much more affordably.
Which we're not liable for. If you make your own, that's on you.
That's fair. Fair point. So back here, let's see here. We've got more market produce, more kale, lettuce, eggplants are going in there, basil in the bags. So I think we've covered the basics here at the Land Lab, but yeah, all these items cover your 5 basic needs. You've got chicken eggs from the chickens, produce, so that's a huge percentage of 1 or 2 people's food source. We've got rainwater and the purification system for water collection. Shelter is the tiny house. Energy is coming from multiple areas. The methane digester, the solar panel. The tiny house is positioned under trees so it doesn't get as hot in the summertime. Mm-hmm. A big part of off-grid living is just being more efficient, building a home that's well insulated and doesn't need all this energy for HVAC or heating.
Yeah.
The tiny house could easily have a small wood-burning stove as well for the wintertime. But energy, sanitation with the methane digester. We've actually got a special toilet that hooks up to the methane digester. We don't have that connected.
Right, and I won't be using that.
That's okay. But you've seen the composting toilet we use.
It's incredible.
It's very straightforward and clean because like the systems work.
Yeah.
These are just new. So many people don't know about them. But you know, if this was a viable option for a young couple to get a 5% down loan on a $90,000 lot with the tiny house, all these systems, I truly believe so many more young Americans and people globally would be doing this kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun sharing about these systems. There's certain systems I always love to lead on. The toilet idea is not one of them.
I get it. I totally get it. But for the people that are listening that are a little bit more crunchy,
yeah,
it works.
Oh, it totally works.
We like to use the liquid fertilizer from the methane digester for our produce. If you connect a toilet to it, you can no longer do that for sanitary reasons. Right. But it functions like an above-ground septic tank that produces methane gas.
Yeah.
And you would just use the liquid fertilizer for trees and non-edibles rather than a garden in that case.
That makes sense. You know what's funny? It's not the actual system that makes me a little like unnerved. I think it's what's around the system. If you actually built just a wooden box and placed the toilet in there, so it somewhat resembles like a normal sort of outdoor restroom, I'd be fine with it.
Oh yeah,
it's funny.
I mean, the toilet would go in the tiny house.
Sweet. Okay.
Yeah, it connects up. Yeah, it wouldn't just be here.
Okay. I don't know why in my mind this entire time I've been thinking the toilet just sitting next to the compost.
No.
Methane digester.
No, it would be in there like a normal toilet. So as y'all can see, we are learning as we go. We are learning as we go about all these circular systems, but we've seen enough to really believe that this is a set of solutions to help address current ecological problems where we're using way too much energy, we're depleting soil, we're hurting our environment with extra pollution. This is a good solution for economic problems.
Yeah.
With inflation right now, the looming financial crisis, the job wage stagnation, young people want solutions. We want solutions. We want to help build these solutions. Plenty of folks from previous generations are living in McMansions and HOAs and golf course communities, and that's fine. I'm not trying to knock that, but so many young people today just want to know that they can hope to have some place to call their own one day, let alone a McMansion. There's a book I'm reading right now called Neo-Feudalism, with the income rift, with so many young people working gig jobs rather than stable jobs. We're actually heading back for a day and age where there's more in common with the medieval feudal systems, where you have a few massive landowners, royalty, which can be equated to the tech companies or the folks that own the large corporations, And then you've got a dwindling middle class, and then a whole lot of young people that are just trying to scrape by living, wherever they can afford while doing gig work. So that'll be a good future episode. I feel like anyone who wants a small, humble, sustainable lifestyle like we're trying to portray here should have that option.
Right.
That should not be illegal.
Right.
So I think that's the biggest battle that's ahead of us. Pushing back on zoning, finding financing solutions, which can be done. The technology is the straightforward part. It's working with the humans that make the rules. That's the tricky business.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we're on track here for episode 1. Land Lab Sim. Those are our last few talking points for today. We've kind of done like a who we are, done a refresh on the Land Lab. If you're new, welcome. We hope you saw something interesting with all these systems. If you'd like to dive deeper, check out our shorts and our long format because we go into way more depth with these systems. So let's dive into the simulator. Why do you think the simulator is going to be useful? How do you see the Land Lab off-grid simulator being used?
Well, for me, I know that all these systems are completely daunting at first. We think of upfront costs. If I put my feet into the shoes of someone that is watching our content, you're going through reels and you see this group of guys that have built this off-grid area and you're like, that's really cool. But it's more like a fleeting thought because you almost don't even want to take the time to think about doing it yourself because there's too much information, there's too much.
Where would you start?
Where would you start? Well, the Land Lab Builder allows you to start because right off the bat, you open that up, it's going to tell you what you can expect from these systems in your area. So it's going to let you know you don't have enough rain to actually get enough for 3 people, but for just you'll be good. Or how much is it going to cost to set up the methane digester and whatnot. And well,
it might be too cold for the methane digester.
It might be too cold for methane digester, but if it does work for you, here's how much it will cost. Or in your climate, it'll work fine in the summer, stick it in a greenhouse in the winter.
Right.
So it's going to give you all these tips and whatnot. And that's why the Land Lab Builder isn't something that you use just once. You're going to want to keep using it month by month because it's going to be giving you updates as the weather changes. And it'll let you know what to expect, in terms of outputs and how much input you need put into it. Because that's going to change every month.
Right. It's like a balance sheet.
Yeah.
It shows you, the end goal for the Land Lab simulator is to show you here's how much food you can produce from these systems with this much labor. Because people ask about that too.
Yeah.
How much time does it take to make all this happen?
Labor's baked into it.
Yeah, and labor's a big part. Like the reality is we need a cultural change where if you had 2 people living here, maybe someone is working a part-time job and the other person a part-time job, and they're both running all these systems. So you have to enjoy this kind of thing to want to pursue this lifestyle.
Because we even factor in well-being because, how many hours of work you're putting into this, what you're getting back. Like we do factor that in as well because that's really important.
I mean, we call this a land lab, but really this is a micro homestead. There's a lot in common with what we're doing with homesteading.
Yeah.
We're just trying to integrate more novel technologies that are also sustainable to make it more feasible to accomplish.
So anyway, all of that, what I said earlier, that's the reason that I think the Land Lab Simulator is great. That's why I would want to use it because it gives me a starting place to understand how I could get started on this. But the Land Lab Sim is not just for people that understand if they can get started with it. It's also for veterans in this, for people that have been living like this for quite some time. The Land Lab Sim is going to bring more data to them and it's going to let them hone in on different systems and be able to utilize each system even better.
Or discover new systems.
Discover new systems. So it's really for anyone.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like up until now, I've used spreadsheets to try to estimate, how much water can we collect based on our rainfall? Between the methane digester and a solar oven, how many meals can we feasibly cook to reduce our energy needs? How many appliances can we power off a 400-watt solar panel? Because the reality is you have to get creative because you're working with less energy. It might be far more sustainable energy, but it's less energy.
Yeah.
This tiny house here would not have as much power as my suburban home. This is a process learning how we reshape this type of lifestyle because it is possible. Other people are doing it.
Yeah.
I'm seeing more and more people on TikTok and Instagram that are living this lifestyle, paying off their home in a few years rather than locking into a 30-year mortgage. And they are more involved in managing their water systems and energy systems, but it makes them more free.
Absolutely.
And that's the appeal.
Yeah.
A few of the features that we're excited to build out in the Land Lab Simulator are the budget tool to show you the prices of all these systems or estimate prices for the DIY systems. So the budget tool and then a export tool to export the list of all the systems.
Yeah.
So you could export all these systems to a spreadsheet, see what they could be generating. And the cool thing is it allows you to build a Land Lab simulator before you invest thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours of time. I don't want to over-romanticize it, this is a lot of hard work, and it takes a lot of people on our team to do it. But we wouldn't do it if we didn't think this was a path forward for a new type of sustainable, affordable living.
Yeah, I think I am most looking forward to that budget tool, because it's one thing to know the prices of each system, but for it to build out, this is how much you can put towards each system each month. And it'll also recommend this is the system you start with, like a compost roller, then a raised bed.
Right.
So it's going to build out the blueprint, and it's going to make things so much more easy for me to follow and understand. So
let's assume you don't have any of this off-grid stuff going. Where do I start? I would tell almost everyone, start with composting. You've already got the materials.
Yeah.
Everyone's got some type of paper towel, leaf, grass clipping, food waste going on. Don't throw it away. Don't send that to the landfill. Start composting.
Yeah.
So, if we were to take a few minutes, which we won't right now, we'll probably make an article or put this in the Land Lab Sim. We could go around and rank every system from 1 to like 30 based on which one you should start with first, based on its ease of installation, the affordability. Right, because it was just a few years ago. I mean, it was just 3 or 4 years ago, my wife and I weren't doing any of this stuff. And now we're doing so much of this. Like, we went from not composting, that was the first thing we did. We started composting. Then we started planting a little garden and using the compost. Because you need to make sure you're using the systems together.
Right.
So for us, it was compost first, and we're saving our food waste and food scraps. Then we started a garden. And then we got chickens. And we started feeding the chickens all the veggie scraps. And then we're getting fresh eggs. So we're building soil, getting produce, getting fresh eggs. After that, we leveled up a little bit and got some rabbits. We don't eat them. The rabbits are just, they look pretty and they have fun in the garden. But I like them because of their manure.
Yeah.
Their manure helps build up the soil, because our soil is very poor in our yard.
And because it's not considered hot, right?
Right. Their manure is not hot. It won't burn out plants like chicken manure will immediately. Right. You got to let chicken manure age. So after the rabbits, we got our first small solar panel system to charge lawn tools and be a backup energy system if there's a blackout.
Yeah.
Then we got the rainwater collection system. It doesn't happen all at once. It takes time. You got to be patient. I've read that most people that build their own homestead take about 10 years to get it fully fleshed out.
But in contrast, it takes about 30 years to pay off a mortgage and get all that. And after 30 years, it's just a house. Whereas with this in 10 years, for 1/7 of the cost, you have all these systems in place. You got your land. And so anyway.
And skills. You've got more skills. You're outdoors more.
You'll be more tan.
Right. That's what I love about this. I would rather earn less money and get to work more directly on these systems outdoors than sit in a cubicle all day long and let my health suffer.
Yeah.
So it's about balance of life. So much of this is just about balance of life. And we don't claim to have all the answers. We're learning, but we want to share what we're learning as we learn it with everyone in our audience. Because we want more people to do what we're doing. We want more people to live in tiny houses, push back on local zoning laws, install rainwater collection systems.
Compost. After learning that 40% of the food in America is wasted, that was startling.
It is
40%.
startling. Right.
So much.
As I've learned about all of the problems we're looking at, with big agriculture, basically I'm learning that big anything has a lot of negative aspects.
Yeah.
Big education is putting students in steep debt.
Yeah.
Big ag is making low quality food that's wrecking the soil and is really cruel to animals.
Yeah.
And it's extractive and it's not good for many farmers.
Right, all the NPK fertilizers sucking out and just destroying soil and turning it to dirt.
Right, and I'm not saying we have to, I don't have the wisdom to say we have to stop all these centralized destructive systems today. That could lead to more human suffering. We've got to ease our way off with systems like this.
Yeah.
So, it's about having options. You're not going to get all your food locally. There's still going to be big farms in the future. You need big farms, especially for grain.
Yeah.
I feel like we're starting to ramble a little bit again, or for me at least. I'm interested in all these topics so I can talk about them all day long.
Right. There'll be plenty more podcasts and much more information will be shared over time.
Yes.
We could call this podcast, we could call it Rambles.
Something like that. The first of anything, whether it's a video or podcast, is always the hardest because we have so many topics to cover.
Right.
And I want to cover them all and go a mile wide and a mile deep. But this morning, we're just going to try to just make it more of a general introduction, talk about that simulator. The simulator is launching. The Kickstarter for the simulator is launching next week, last week of May 2023. We actually have the first version already coded and deployed. It's a beta version where we're working the bugs out. So the Kickstarter is going to be great just to put all these extra new features we've been thinking up.
Yeah.
From the budget tracker to like letting people know what their conditions are locally.
Yeah.
So we're really excited to get this Kickstarter out there. It's a phenomenal educational tool. It's great for people that homestead, people that want to go off grid. We think it's just a building block moving us towards the way that many of us humans should be living.
Yeah.
We need more options, and this is to help educate people about those options.
Yeah.
Joe, are we missing anything else in this podcast, episode 1?
No, I would just say, yeah, like he said, next week the Kickstarter comes out. Accompanied with the Land Lab Simulator, there's also a Land Lab course, and it's going to be going over a lot of these systems that we have here, and you'll be able to learn more in depth about them. So that's really exciting too.
Yes, it's a companion course. So just like every system in the simulator will have a link to where you can buy the system today from a company, like a sustainably minded company, or have a link to a DIY system, there'll be another link to learn more about that system in our digital course. So the digital course is integrated with the simulator just to teach you as much as possible about how all this stuff works.
Yeah, and even though it's officially launching next week, we will have a pre-launch page in the description below. So you can go ahead and click that link, and that way it'll take you to the Kickstarter site, and it will show you the video, and that video is going to go far more in depth about the Land Lab Simulator. There's going to be lots of content and graphics below that you can read through, and it'll just give you an idea of what to expect for that Kickstarter. And then, the next Tuesday it should launch. So.
Yep. And if we weren't clear enough, I just want to state it super clearly. The whole purpose of this digital Land Lab Simulator app is to allow anyone to build a blueprint for what sustainable systems can support them where they live, and guide them into how they begin the journey and process of building a land lab to call home, like we've built here. The point is to give people the systems to live more sustainably, affordably, enjoyably. This isn't like some hobby. We want people to be able to live this way. This is where we're headed towards. We want to live this way. I've got 2 baby boys, so I can't live in the tiny house, but my dream land lab looks a whole lot like this, just with a bigger tiny house.
Yeah,
basically.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we believe in all this so much that, like we said earlier, this is our full-time job, is building out this land lab with our team and promoting it and sharing it with others. So we've definitely made sacrifices for this to happen. So your support means a lot to us. Whether you're commenting, liking, it all adds up for us. So just thank you for your support and watching through this whole video. I know it's been lengthy, but it's our first podcast, so we're just excited to get more content out to you all.
Absolutely. And moving forward, our podcast will have more of a specific single topic.
Yeah.
They'll be shorter. We're big into having short form content that's digestible.
Yeah.
But we hope this gave you all a pretty good glimpse into who we are, what Acorn Land Labs is, and why we're building a digital simulator to help you build systems like this to provide for your basic needs: food, water, energy, sanitation, and shelter.
Yeah. Well, we hope you'll have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll see you at the Kickstarter next week.
Awesome. Thanks a bunch. Bye, everybody.
Take care.